Right, welcome to this session about public interest media. So I'm your moderator here. My name is Brigitte Alfter, and I'm one of those journalists who suddenly found herself trapped in the body of a director. So I had to learn all these weird abbreviations like KPI or HR or these kind of things, which is also what this session is at least partially about. I'm the founding director of Arena for Journalism in Europe, where we provide infrastructure predominantly for editorial collaboration in Europe, but because we have these large networks with conferences, in-person meetings, online meetings, trainings, etc., people asked us, okay, what about the non-editorial side of things? Because there were so many public interest media, small media, startups experimenting who had these struggles to learn all these abbreviations and a bit more. So we set up Reference the European Independent Media Circle, and I'm really happy to see several of the members here. And then we also initiated the Journalism Value Project, which did some quantitative mapping of this whole new sector, some qualitative interview series, which I highly recommend, and Peter will talk much more about that. And then yesterday we launched a final report with recommendations. I have a wonderful panel, and this is part of our work in a way, because we bring together several of the actors in the field who do similar work. We have Marcia Parker. She is doing the philanthropic work at the New York Times, but today she is here in her role as the chairman of the INN network, the independent news network in the US, which has quite a few more members than Reference and quite a bit more experience, but very similar experience we learned when we prepared for this panel. We have Lela Vujanic, I hope I pronounced this properly. She's a research manager with Project Oasis for Zembra Media, and she was, like with the Journalism Value Project, involved in some of the mapping exercises, because we need to know who are these media, what are they struggling with, how are they funded, etc. And then we have Peter Matjasic, who is Executive Director of Investigate Europe, so one of these organizations, but not with a journalism background, which is very helpful when we try to strengthen the organizations. And he is also the chairman of the Reference Circle, and in this building phase of the Reference Circle, he has taken the job of a working chairman, so he actually can allocate some time to it. But I would like each of you to present yourself a little bit more than name and title and tell about the work. So Marcia, if you start.
Let's see. Welcome, everyone. I know those of you who lasted to now. It's a pretty this is a big conference, as everyone knows. Oops, hopefully I didn't hurt that. So let me just talk a little bit about INN. So INN was, some of you may know, but it was set up in 2009, and it was actually set up by about 25 investigative news organizations. And that was the beginning, because they were kind of out there by themselves doing great investigative work, and they wanted to start coming together to learn together and to grow together, et cetera. And then, over the years, those included, some of you might know, like the Center for Investigative Reporting, which recently merged in the United States with Mother Jones, a very well-known website and magazine that's in the investigative space, and the Center for Public Integrity. And those were kind of the two sort of founding organizations that put that group together. And then in the years that kind of rolled by, we now have just about 500 members, so it's grown tremendously. Why? Because sadly, news is kind of broken in our world. All of us know that. Everyone in this room has been dealing with that issue. And we needed new models, and the nonprofit model was one possibility, right? And we saw that it had worked in the investigative space, and so we have begun to see huge amount of growth, and it's still one promising model. I'm not only for nonprofit news. I want every news organization in our world to be supported by individuals, by foundations, by business, by everyone. That's what we need to have a sustainable model for all media, and we need everyone to feel like it's the same as supporting your food bank. It's a need. A fact-based reporting is needed for a healthy country, city, community, et cetera, et cetera. So it is, as I say, it's grown tremendously. We now have a set of news organizations that includes big national organizations, like you might have heard the 19th, which covers issues relating to women and gender issues across our nation. We have almost every state now has a statewide news organization. I used to run one, Cal Matters, which when I started 8 or 9 years ago had like 3 people, and then by the time I left, we had almost 100, so that was like really exciting, and it's still going. And we patterned ourselves after the Texas Tribune, and they gave us, we're gonna talk about collaboration in 2 seconds, they gave us so much help and support. Everyone is shares, like we're trying to learn from each other, we're not trying to put walls up. So, we're just building, we're trying to build or advance a social enterprise model for journalism. That's what this is all about. And it's not just for investigative, it's for all news. And it seems to be working. INN, over that time, we grew 17 times membership from the beginning, and it just continues. We actually don't let in 40% of the people that apply. That's not to say rah, INN. It's because the standards are really high, transparency in everything that they do. They have to be willing to collaborate. Like, you can't just come and say, I want to do this, but I don't want to do any of those other things you want us to do. They have to be transparent about every donor. They have to be transparent about the journalism that they do. The standards have to be high, as I know they are for all of you in this room. So, that's kind of where we are. We have a lot of, probably one of the fastest growing areas is the local news network. Many of our organizations right now are serving communities of color across the country because, or just news deserts in general, but those 2 are the fastest growing kind of sectors within local news. And we are doing our very best to encourage that and to bring more financial support in. And, we are a collaborative organization, then I'll stop. We collaborate on editorial projects across the entire network, then even within the network, the climate and environment news organizations often collaborate on big packages. They collaborate also on distribution. Used to be that, if you're a news organization, you only put only your readers got, and you didn't ever give it to anyone. Everyone is distributing their work across the entire network, and we think that's really an important part of audience building. And then we do an annual index report that tracks every single aspect of the growth of the nonprofit model, because it's still young. We're learning, and we want everybody to understand what's happening with revenue. And revenue is the other big area that we do a lot of collaboration around, because we want all of our news organizations not to just be dependent on philanthropy, but to be dependent on business revenue as well, advertising and other things, sponsorship of events, et cetera. We want everybody to be in that space.
Thanks a lot, Marcia. And Lela, you have a slightly different background. You have been mapping this. You have been looking into this type of organization. Tell me a bit more about you.
Thank you, Brigitte. Thank you all for coming, for keeping up with the festival and having strength and energy for our panel. Also, I know it's not easy. So I'm working on Project Oasis as a regional research manager for Central and Eastern Europe. So what's Project Oasis? So we mapped and we continue to map independent public interest digital native media across Europe, actually in 44 European countries. How we did this mapping, I really need to give credit to our researchers. We had a stellar team of national researchers for each of these 44 countries who did in-depth interviews with media founders of the selected media organizations. When I say selected media organizations, that means that these media organizations needed to satisfy certain criteria, primarily to produce original public interest content, to be independent. So we interpreted this independency primarily as financial independency. So obviously no state ownership, political party, or church affiliation, and no corporate ownership. Our main product, so in these interviews we asked media leaders many questions. We asked them basically everything. We asked them about their mission, about their editorial strategy, type of content they produce, journalism techniques they used. We asked them about audiences, revenue models. So we listed 30 different revenue streams that they could choose from. And based on their answers, we pulled the data out, analyzed the data, and produced insights about different correlations between revenue and team structure and other insights that I will talk more a bit later. We also produced media directory that includes media profiles of more than 500 media organizations in Europe. I'm happy to say that media directory is being really widely used, and I invite you to visit media directory at projectoasis.org. It's great for the journalists to find collaborations, for example, or just to map or get inspired to see who is doing what. It's also great for those of you who are also working in research or policy level to build further on our insights. Just as a basic outlook of the sector, so it's a very dynamic, vibrant sector, this subsector of digital native media in Europe. It ranges from very small startups run by volunteers, we included those also, to really super successful operations that earn 10 million euros annually. They were started by what we call reluctant entrepreneurs, meaning started by editors and journalists who didn't necessarily want to run a media business, but wanted to start, or many of them actually lack business skills, but they started these media organizations to escape media capture, to cover previously underserved communities or geographies. They collaborate by default and innovate by default, but they're also facing many challenges. Biggest challenging being, as we all know, financial sustainability, but also different types of threats which are experienced across Europe. More than 70% of media in our directory reported threats and attacks, and this is not restricted to, let's say, Belarus, Azerbaijan, or recently Georgia and Serbia, but it's really happening everywhere. I'll stop with that. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. We'll go more deeply into the various challenges. Peter, you are a bit both in an organization and in trying to get an understanding of the field. A bit more about you.
Danke, Brigitte. Yes, you already outed me as the non-journalist in the room. I'm also outing myself as a non-business person per se. So my background was activist, youth representative, and a funder. I was working for Open Society for 9 years and then moved on back to the civil society and journalism, because I know it's not, some journalists don't like to be part of the ecosystem of civil society, but I see all of this as part of an ecosystem that is fighting oppression and holding power to account, so in that sense, part of civil society. So coming in and being part of a team that is innovating with a cooperative model and being those romantic journalists that wanted to leave legacy media and do something different and be able to just decide on their own without any influence, outside influence on what and when they want to research, which is great, but then, you need to also kind of organize things a little bit and agree on certain internal procedures, and that's kind of, I know I'm going to sound a bit geeky, but I like organizational development. I like thinking about how to bring the permanent cross-border team from 11 different countries together, take into account that there are maybe not just language barriers, but also different understandings of journalistic cultures present, and I'm speaking here first about Investigate Europe, where I'm the current director. But this also translates into reference that is in a way very similar to INN in terms of its idea, but also the Journalism Value Project that I'll talk about a little bit. So in Investigate Europe, it's really one of the examples of, when you hear about, let's do investigative journalism between different individual organizations or between legacy media, this is something in between. It's like really permanent, constant cross-border collaboration. And on the editorial side, you can already imagine the challenges. Now, think of the challenges of being based and registered in one country, but having people in 11, and the rest I'll just leave to imagination. And then, of course, the obsession, the positive obsession of wanting to own your business and wanting to create processes that cater for that principle. Operationalizing that can be challenging, but we are there, and it's working. So it takes time, but it's working. And within reference, what I liked, and I felt, oh, within ecosystem, it's the first time I met my flock. By this, I mean, even though there are journalists there who created these news media, this part of news sector, public interest, independent media, there are also people who experience that, oh yes, I want to do journalism, but I want to do it in a coherent way, and I need to have funds for that. And then I need to manage a team, and I need to think about HR. I need to think about impact. I need to think about management, and I don't like any of those words. So what better way than to come together as a group and create something that will focus on advocating for more funding for everyone so that there's a bigger piece of the pie for everyone to eat from, if we can. Also advocate for when one of us is under attack, which is more often, unfortunately, nowadays than ever. And then particularly to exchange knowledge and learn from each other. So similar to what you, Marcia, was saying, the principle is you need to be independent, editorially independent. You can be for-profit or non-profit, but you need to work for public interest. And you need to be willing to collaborate, particularly in this case, share your struggles. We create a safe space where these leaders, these journalistic leaders can come together and share about, you know, how difficult it was to manage that particular situation or that particular connection or that particular funder, things where normally you don't because you feel like either shame or feel that that's threatening you in your future endeavors. So creating those spaces I find very important. And then finally, I'll just mention what you are already seeing, and I know some of you were like, wait a second, am I in the right panel because I see a different slide? This slide is, I will talk about it later, it's from what we launched yesterday. And some of the members of reference launched an EU-funded project called the Journalism Value Project with the aim that was similar to what Project Oasis did to further map and complement what is already out there, but get a bit of a conversation starting around what is the value of public interest journalism? How does it differ from other values? How do funders, think tanks, academics, researchers, journalists themselves, policymakers approach this? Do they even think about it? So you will hear more about it there, and the QR code leads you to the white paper that we launched yesterday. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. It's nice to get these introductions because we are already getting a bit closer to what we are aiming for here. So as I see it, the overall question for this panel is, what are the struggles of these media, and how can knowledge exchange, collaboration, finding a shared voice, how can that help us? And maybe if you start, Marcia, and then Peter with the European overview. You, Lela, and Peter with the European overview, and then Marcia with the US experience. Would you start?
Yeah, okay. But I also want to touch upon what public interest, how media in both of our
how to define
research,
it.
Yeah, how
yes.
to define it. And I want to start with one
the
media from
point.
Serbia. It's called Machina. I came here from Serbia, and probably many of you know, Serbia is rocked by biggest protest in its history, led by students. So students are blocking university across country, but all, not one or two, but everything is blocked. There are mass protests going on. High schools are also blocked. So what's new? This Machina is covering these protests and these huge social movements. Social movement is covering from inside. So it's not distant, it's not neutral, it's not outside the protest, but it's constantly in the field with students, with protesters, also engaging people in online discussions, but also, for example, organizing public panels or forums when they invite people to give new and fresh political frameworks for interpreting current events. And I think this is one of the ways how media in our research is redefining this. What does it mean to be public interest media in today's Europe, being inside, not outside the movements or issues they cover. Similar to Machina, many in our directory, Oko Press in Poland, Kritika Politična, I think I see them in audience, Fumasa from Portugal, many others. So many media in our directory have human rights and society as main area of coverage, together with related themes, for example, migration, gender, and feminism. They they engage their audiences in online discussions. And other feature that I really want to emphasize, but this is not based on data, but my private agenda, personal agenda. Many of them, so they're digital natives, they were born online, but many choose to go beyond the screens. And there are two great examples that I want to mention from Latin America. I know we are focused on Europe, but we at Sembra Media, we also mapped Hispano-America. Mutante from Colombia and El Surti from Paraguay. Mutante specifically for engaging audiences and creating online conversational communities, and El Surti for going beyond the screens. Similar, to go back to Europe, Partizan from Hungary. So last year they did a tour, 8 cities in Hungary, where they organize public forums. So founder of Partizan, and he's also a main host because this is a YouTube channel, they put a couch in center of each city and invited anybody, literally anybody could come and debate him on a certain topic, and topics were highly controversial for Hungarian society. And I think this is consistent with the Journalism Value Project. I think you say somewhere, if you want your audience to pay, you need to meet them in person or something like that. Petra knows better, definitely. One more minute, okay. Some insight related to revenue. So most of the organization in our directory is non-profit. Around 50% of them are non-profit, though for-profit tend to earn on average more. Just to give you orientation, average annual revenue being $500,000 for for-profits and 300,000 for non-profit. Also, those who rely primarily on advertising, this is for for-profit or on grants for non-profit, tend to have higher average annual revenue, though they employ different other revenue streams, ranging from book publishing, individual donation, consultancies, and other things. There are also different correlations between, for example, team structure and roles that you have. Maybe just to mention, I will end with this. This is the most substantial difference, that those who have people in sales, in technology, and in business role earn 6 times more than those who don't have these roles.
Interesting learning. Thank you. Peter, could you complement the European experience from where you are?
Okay. So I know you're keeping us on a leash here, but that's good because we want to hear from the audience later on. So I'll just say a few words on what you can read in this particular report. So some of the things are going to be self-evident. Some of the things are not heard for the first time nor new. What makes it more substantiated is the fact that there's been an 18-month process behind it, and we have now conversations, summaries of the conversation, summary of a survey, summary of a mapping, summary of study visit, and podcast series. So there's a bit of quantitative data to accompany what might be a public opinion, such as we need to move from short-term project funding to core funding. Yes, we hear that all the time, but now we also have stories behind it that tell why that matters. But I'll just start with a quote that we heard during these consultations. Independent journalism is not just about informing the public. It's the bedrock of democracy, social cohesion, and civic trust in Europe. But it's under siege. It's a bit similar to what you were saying. It's like the infrastructure part that we need to focus on. So this report is the result of 18 months of deep listening, research, and collaboration across Europe with journalists, funders, policymakers, whistleblowers, civil society, and think tanks. We went quite wide, as you can see. What we found is both deeply worrying and profoundly hopeful. So I have 5 key points to mention. Let's see if I'm managing that a lot of time. It's a wake-up call for democracy. What autocrats fear most is free press. The lengths they go to suppress it shows how vital it is. So nothing new, but unfortunately, journalists all over Europe are facing violence and intimidation, legal repressions through slaps, surveillance, and censorship. What we need to do is we need to move from surviving to thriving. How we will do that, we'll hopefully see in a second. Financially, the picture is also bleak. Half of the independent newsrooms that we surveyed have budgets under 200,000 euros a year. A third can't plan for more than 6 months ahead. Many journalists are burnt out, underpaid, and in some cases taking out personal loans just to make ends due. Meanwhile, the public trust in media is falling and misinformation is rising. This is the reality that I know all of you know all too well on your own personal experience. So, second key point, who are these journalists? They are the beating heart of journalism. It's the independent, mission-driven outlets led by citizen journalists, activists, and local entrepreneurs. It's not your old-school investigative journalist that sits in behind the scenes and does their work, which is still very much important, but it's complemented by a new, more dynamic approach, I would say. These are mostly small digital-born outlets, similar to what Lela found out, often non-profits, filling the void left by collapsing local and investigative media, underfunded and overworked, but where some founders had to sell their cars or take personal loans to keep their newsrooms alive. So these are the real stories that we heard. Why does it matter is the third key point, because journalism is a public good. Journalism has societal value. So it's time to stop seeing journalism as a cost and start seeing it as an investment in democracy. And I think this cannot ring more true than the world we live in right now. So journalism doesn't just report the news, it holds power to account. It builds trust in communities. I think especially Marcia can talk about the communities of color and other communities in the US and local level where that rings true. It defends democracy. And journalism provides societal value that's hard to quantify, from public health reporting to anti-corruption investigations. Yet it struggles to attract sustainable or sufficient funding because it's not been mapped as clearly, so hence all these initiatives matter, as other creative industries. So we need to stop seeing journalism as a cost and start treating it as essential democratic infrastructure. And then a sentence that might be a bit provocative, because I'm not a fan of measuring too much, but if we cannot measure it, if we can measure it, we can support it. So that's something to bridge the kind of gap that we have between what we like to do and what the funders want to see where their buck goes. Fourth point, fresh thinking from the field. Journalists are not just reporters, they're innovators, they're entrepreneurs, they're educators and community builders. We learned this through the podcast series that I invite you to listen. They're quite in-depth and long, but really useful, where you see how they work, how it's not traditional newsrooms, how it's really about media leaders that do something that they are passionate about, often small, independent, and often started by journalists themselves with a mission to serve their communities. They do something called live journalism and co-created content that you were referring to with local communities. And they have strong ethical frameworks and independence from corporate influence to the extent that frustrates people like me when you are not allowed to fundraise for certain things because, no, you cannot go to that funder because they're evil. No, you cannot go to that funder because of that, which I understand. But sometimes you need to be a bit more pragmatic as well. So finding that it's an ongoing conversation, find that for yourself. Where is it that you are willing to maybe on a tool, not on a, so for us, we couldn't take Google money, but I could invest in our multimedia producer to attend a training funded with Google money. That was okay. So find those middle ways that could be helpful for you to be still in line with your ethical values. And finally, how do we fix this? With a clear roadmap of 5 recommendations that you can read there, because otherwise I don't have time.
I like that you collaborate with the ugly old moderator who always has to cut people short, but I also want to open up afterwards. Marcia, the INN has been around for quite a bit longer than Reference and has so many members, so we're curious to hear your experiences. And there's so much that we share.
Sure. I mean, I hope I'm going to just make a statement, and then I hope this will open it up to the room, because I think we all want to really hear from you guys. You know, I just feel like the thing that everyone in this room probably is thinking the most about is sustainability. Like, we just don't have the answer yet, right? We have 1 million funders, I know, at CalMatters, and every one of the INN members and every for-profit that's raising money too. Without them, there's no way we would even be in business. So I am grateful. When I was at CalMatters, all the funders in California were absolutely my partners from day one. and stayed with us through all those years, and that was not easy for them. You had to take a big risk, because we were like nothing at the beginning, 3 people that were like, we have this idea, you know? But why? I think that there's a lot of both promise in the for-profit model still and in the nonprofit model and in all the other models that are emerging. Universities are getting into the act. There's a million things going on in that space. Even in the United States, high school journalists are being trained there's an organization called Boyle Heights Beat in Southern California. They've trained high school kids to cover a community that has not had any coverage for literally decades. It's essentially a community of color for sure. And you know, these are new models. College campus newspapers are now becoming community newspapers because they're all gone in their community. So now they're like, go beyond and you guys start covering your community. So, I mean, I'm hopeful. I want to hear what everybody else is thinking. At this point in time, I feel like we are still very dependent on philanthropy. I'm looking at Casey sitting right here, who's an amazing funder. And our other revenue streams, I'm hoping everybody's got these, but advertising, right? Like, I remember CalMaris, it took them years, like, there are no way, Marcia, we're putting ads on the site, we won't do it, we're not putting them in our newsletter. I'm like, you guys are crazy, like, we're crazy. So now those walls are dropping. We're starting to do that. Sponsorships of events, products that we make, like election guides. Like, I raised so much money by making that guide sponsored by organizations. And we got it, we ended up translating into 12 languages. I mean, these are things you just have to do, right? You have to test and try. So, and readers, we can't forget readers, right? We all start with readers. Even the tiniest ones have readers, and you have to move them through the lane, right? So that over time they give more. It doesn't mean that they have to go from $10 a month to thousands, but people can go up, and as they understand the mission and the value to them, they will go up. We have every one of our news organizations is proving that. I see it all the time, and I believe in that model. And then lastly, I'm just gonna mention the national and kind of global conversation going on. For me, the most promising thing that I feel is going on right now is that there are conferences like that, and that the funders throughout our world are starting to really talk together about coming together and having a national conversation and building in the United States, a national infrastructure for it. Press Forward's the example in the United States. You know, we have, I think, how many, 36 chapters, I think now, hopefully to get to all 50 states. Everyone is working together to start talking about it, because without that, it means that every individual or news organization person, usually who doesn't have any experience with money, has to go and make relationships. And that's really hard for people that don't know how to really do it very well. So, to me, having a national conversation, having press forwards in local places across America is changing the entire dynamic and raising the bar for it to happen. I believe now it can happen in every state. I see it happening, and even in some of the places where there isn't a lot of money. You don't have to have a lot of money. You just have to have people want to talk about it and raise their voice and bring people, you know, to the table. So I'm excited. Now we have Press Forward in, you know, so far in Germany, right? And a few other places are starting up. And that is very, very helpful to have that conversation happen across our world. And then lastly, I'm just going to mention the News Match program that INN has, because it's, you know, this is a win. And, you know, you don't always have wins. News Match was started, we just hit our 10th year. This is a national kind of campaign. We've raised money from, you know, a bunch of amazing funders. And so in 10 years, we've raised about $400 million. And what happens is, if you're a member, you do have to be an INN member, but we then give you money at the end of that. And then what's been built onto that, and some, you know, we don't give money to like the CalMaris or the ProPublicas of the world that have tons of money already. That you have to be under 1 million in revenue, and I know for some people that seems like a lot, but we have many way under that. And they get those matches, so it could be 40,000, 25,000, just depends. And then what's been built on in the last 2 years of news matches, now we have in almost every state, news organizations are able to go get matches to their news match. So they go to their communities, their little community foundation over here, and anybody else who's in that space and wanting to give money can do that, and then they get sort of a double match essentially, and sometimes multiple matches, because they have arranged for a number of funders to match their news match. So those are positive things, and I know there's a lot of negative things too, but I want to end on a positive note, so I'll stop there.
That's really nice. I think the talks show that there are so many shared challenges and so many shared attempts of solving them. And in Europe, to match the American example, there is a Journalism Funders Forum,
Right.
which is foundations, philanthropy across Europe, meeting up and talking about the field, talking with each other, trying to bring more funders into that group and inform about it. I would really like to open for the last 15 minutes to hear from the audience here, and I see several organizations represented. So what I think would be really nice to have here is get an impression of what are the challenges, but most of all, come out with a wish list and then think about, okay, how can we address this wish list? What could my organization, my experience contribute to solve things? So let's open up for a shared to-do list.
Anyone want to start?
There's-
Be brave.
There's a microphone coming.
Hi, quick observation about newspapers and
Please introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry.
Also. Sorry.
I'm Alex. I'm from a non-profit in Gothenburg called Gothenburg Media Hub. A question about 50 years ago, maybe we needed the newspapers would be printed on paper, and that would be a big problem. Now we are all digital, but we are relying also on like the internet, social media to help us push like visibility and find people to subscribe or to hear our stories. Do you have a conversation ongoing with big tech, with social media companies in terms of algorithms and how this works? And could there alternatively be a different solution to that?
I'm not hopeful about that one.
Would you like to reply on that, Marcia?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Facebook, et cetera, right? Like there was help for our industry, right? But it was already a few years ago. Now there really isn't. I think everybody maybe news organizations would come and have those conversations again, but I think the trust is broken right now. I can't see that really being, I think Blue Sky has potential, right? Like everybody's starting to get on Blue Sky. That seems really interesting. It's, as a really tiny audience right now, but they are approaching, the founders of it have had conversation with news organizations. We want to do better, we want to make this a place that we want to help you get your news out there, et cetera, but it's 5 minutes old, so we don't know yet, but I'm hopeful. But I don't see any of the other major, I don't know, maybe someone else has a different view. I don't see any real hope out there with the other.
I would just add, it's in terms of conversation not, and it's interesting whether there should be one, and I find it difficult with some of the big ones at the moment, given their, bowing to the king approach. So I would say the challenge that we have is where do you engage with the audience? And then you always kind of have to diversify and go from, oh, okay, now I'm not going to use Facebook, but people forget that WhatsApp and Insta is also from Meta, but you're still on Insta because that's where the people are. So, and then do you go to TikTok, but that's where the people are. Oh, but it's Chinese, it's bad. So it's kind of like you have to have that conversation internally, and then it's a lot of additional work that maybe wasn't there before. So that's those conversations we are having on how does that affect the small and medium-sized audience engagement work in these newsrooms. On the other hand, it's like I'm trying to see it as, well, it's just a tool. So you need to find a different tool. Maybe new tools will be created. So I have a slight hope that even though there's this interim period where the right mind might not have come along, but what is worrying is that those in the fact-checking community that are also part of our network have been suffering a lot. It's like, we don't talk about it, but they had the same avalanche, negative avalanche as pulling USAID is pulling from the fact-checking community in Europe. So that has been from one day to another a complete disaster. So they are struggling and they're kind of wondering, where do I fit now?
So I don't have any conversations, no Elon or Mark on my speed dial. And of course, it's bad to rely distribution-wise on somebody that you don't have any sort of stable contract or whatever, who can change algorithm or change everything, and then what you're gonna do. So to sound now completely not realistic, I think the only viable solution for the future would be building some sort of public infrastructure, publicly owned and governed. But apart from that, if that's too unrealistic, that's why I mentioned this going beyond the screens. I really think the way forward is meeting your audiences online, and building lasting relationship with them through these different offline formats. And these offline formats can be free of charge, but later can also serve as a way to monetize, can be a basis for your, for example, individual donations campaign. But primarily, I'm thinking about building these lasting relationships so people know you and they know you what's your primary product, like newsletter, website. I think this is the part of the solution, yeah.
Thank you.
I would just add one more thing, which would be WhatsApp, because so many of our news organizations are using WhatsApp very effectively to reach audiences, and I think that's fascinating, along with like local events, right? Like they're really connected. They're going to like coffee shops and doing things with their people. That's how you get close too.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Gilles Bruno, and I have a blog for 20 years. That's name is Observatoire des Médias. Yesterday night I was in an aperitivo organized by Mastodon, and they talked precisely about what you talked just a minute ago. And they said, well, we want to help exactly what Blue Sky said. The problem is that I said to them was the onboarding of Mastodon was a real mess, and I said that frankly to them, and they had a lot of work to do, and they are going to do it, they told me. And they proposed that, to do instances that media could make instance of, servers, private servers, and to work with them, etc. So it seems interesting, but even at my local level, which is nano level, I tried to put pressure on them and saying, well, you have to work first. You have to not to change the image of Mastodon, which according to me is a nerd platform, and to wide open it and make it simpler to take on the platform. And then maybe you will have the New York Times opening an instance for their journalists or their public, or we don't know. And maybe it's maybe a solution.
Thank you. I think I saw someone else. No.
I can't not talk in this session. If you don't know me, I'm Janine Warner. I'm the co-founder of Summer Media. Honored to work with Lela on Project Oasis. I want to really recognize Newsmatch, I think, is a really smart project that is leveraging donor fund to bring membership donors. I think that's a really smart move. In addition to mapping Europe and Project Oasis, we have global Project Oasis now. And we're doing this kind of mapping all over the world. And I just have to say, we see the same trends over and over again. Many of the things you said, Peter, we see in Latin America, in the US, and other parts of the world that we're mapping. And much of why we do this is trying to see those trends as they come. So you talked about big donors working together. I want to do a shout out to IFPIM, the International Fund for Public Interest Media, is another one outside the US, much like Press Forward. And I'm really interested in each of you maybe sharing a trend that you have seen in your work. You've shared a lot of great suggestions, but what's coming at us? What should entrepreneurs be getting ready for? And how can those of us trying to support them do that better? Thanks so much for making this space.
Thank you for this question. This is a nice leeway to concluding remarks, and our dear producer is standing there waving to us. Maybe Marcia, Lela, Peter, some final remarks on this good question.
That's a big question. Let's see. I'm an optimistic person by nature, so that's going to be where I'm always going to land. I just think that we have to advance every one of these conversations about the whole world coming to understand that food security is the same as information and news security. I mean, it just has to be. We have to get everyone in every community across our world to like recognize the need, and that means that you can put $5 a month towards your news organization or however much you can afford, and that you will do that, and that we have to have those conversations happening everywhere, and we have to kind of get past the place where we believe that philanthropy is going to be the answer, because there's no way philanthropy could meet the entire need of the news community across our world, right? But they're already at the table, and they're at the table in a big way, but we need lots of other organizations to be in it too. We need the JP Morgan Chases of the world, right? Like, they actually are. That's one of the few, and they could be in trouble tomorrow and be a front page story in every major newspaper in the world, but they haven't decided not to do that, not to help journalism because of that. They know there's the risk there. So I worry so much less about the JP Morgan and the Chases coming in, because I don't care. If there's a story, it's going to be done. No one's going to back away from that. But do I want every CEO in America to say, yeah, we're going to help journalism because we think it's a core need of our democracy? I'm coming in. So that's where I am.
Lela.
So relying on our audience, because I think this is a sort of safe harbor when everything else being fragile, from advertising to funders abruptly leaving. This is something that can save us. I'm not saying that that readers' revenue can be high revenue in every country for every media organization, but as a percentage in overall revenue structure. Concerning funders, we talked about collaboration, and I know that there are these networks, but I feel that funders are actually not collaborating enough, especially public to private. So we don't duplicate things or to better invest money that we have. And I really think we're gonna survive. Situation now is terrible, dramatic. A lot of people is losing their jobs at this moment, but I think we are smart enough, even in this room, and there is money around it just to be redistributed better. And maybe now, because this is such crisis, maybe now is the time to think about those not very realistic or crazy ideas. Yeah.
Nice closing remark. Peter.
Okay, not trend, but what we can do now based on the needs, very practically, 3 out of the 5 recommendations that you can read there: capacity building, specifically on skills development of non-editorial areas like management, tech, fundraising, help the journalist founders learn the business skills needed to operate a newsroom. Then secondly, collaboration and peer learning, less competition, more community. So support the networks to share legal advice, to share marketing tools, to share tech. There's already initiatives happening on this, but more investment into that. So it's sharing the burden in a way. And finally, policy reform and advocacy sounds outdated and difficult given the politicians we have, but recognizing journalism as a charitable cause would help a long way to be able to then invest as a citizen, push back more on slaps, obviously, and then just, really focus on, let's stop asking ourselves whether it's worth funding, but let's start asking what happens to democracy if we don't.
Thank you very much. I think this panel was very much about collaboration, and good collaboration needs us to know ourselves and to know each other. I think in the US you're a few years advanced in getting to know each other. In Europe, we are dealing with that. We are learning to get to know each other. And that's turning me very optimistic, because it witnesses that we all want this collaboration. And I think together we are stronger. So let me conclude on that. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
We have plenty to do.